So I'm going to be going over my group project, If Beale Street Could Talk, pages 132 to 162, as I wasn't able to make it to the presentation. So this is my way of making it up. Alright, let's continue on to slide 2. Sharon's continued efforts, the emotional toll of advocacy. Sharon heads all the way to Puerto Rico to speak with Pietro Alvarez in hopes to convince Miss Rogers that her son-in-law had nothing to do with what happened to her and showcases the lengths family will go through to see a loved one safe. When in the nightclub with Pietro, she hands a photograph of Fanny in hopes Victoria would realize she had the wrong man arrested. When Pietro declines her proposal and pays for her drinks, unbeknownst to her, this causes her to tear up. All the while back home, Ernestine and Joseph take care of a pregnant Tish, and to stop her from trying to work, as that could affect her pregnancy. I believe these instances in the book truly shows what fighting an uphill battle looks like, as without Victoria coming forward to retract her accusation, Fanny's incarceration will continue. When Sharon starts to tear up, this shows the grief and anguish many family members face when a loved one is imprisoned wrongfully, as despite their best efforts, a lot of the time it's in vain, and truly highlights a detrimental flaw within the justice system. How does the stress and uncertainty of his situation affect his mental state and his relationship with Tish and his family? Fonny, being in prison for a crime he did not commit, tries to remain optimistic through his wrongful persecution. Despite his best attempts, the stress of knowing he has a child on the way chips away at his resolve to remain in high spirit over the course of the book. Alright. What does Baldwin suggest about the nature of loyalty? Baldwin shows the reader that loyalty is an act of love that's unbreakable through the trials and tribulations of Tish and Fanny as they face an unjust system that is utterly corrupt, yet still retain hope that they will be reunited. Yeah, I know this one's my slide because how did I forget to put unjust instead of just justice? hmm. Also, it's not just the loyalty of a significant other on display, but also the friends and family along the way who aid Tish and Fanny through this whole ordeal. Fanny and Daniel's friendship, shared trauma and injustice. How does Baldwin use their bond to reflect the shared trauma of black men? Fanny and Daniel both have experienced systemic racism. Daniel got arrested for stealing a car he didn't steal. He just got framed by cops because he fits the description of a black man. I don't know why that took me so long to read that. Fanny got falsely accused of raping a Puerto Rican female, and they didn't have enough proof on him, but they still imprisoned him for his skin color. The author tells us how black men are constantly treated in that society and how unjust it is. Which is true. The corruption of the justice system. Officer Bell's role. Officer Bell was a white cop that just so happened to be making his way up the same street Tish and Fanny were shopping on. Fanny and Tish seem to get separated when Tish ends up getting into an altercation with a younger, disrespectful white man. Fanny defends Tish. In this moment, he comes around the corner, grabs the man, and starts to really give him a beating. This is when Officer Bell comes running across the street and we can get a taste of what he's really like. Right? Yeah. Red and blue. During the altercation, we were shown that multiple witnesses were at the shop and in the street when this event occurred. Of course, unfortunately for Tish, it was a predominantly white area. Yet, when Tish tells the cop that the man had assaulted her and disrespected her to the highest degree, not a single person stood up and seconded that statement. As Officer Bell takes a look around the room and not a single witness steps forward. As he begins to give Fanny a dirty look, a look that Tish recognizes that if she was to move from Fanny this instant, there's a good chance the cop would look to her, if not kill Fanny. Officer Bell then proceeds to ask Fanny if he lived around the area. Fanny gave him his address, and Bell was going to take him to jail had it not been for the Italian store owner. I'm afraid it would have gotten much worse for Fanny. Let me take a little sip because that was a mouthful. The role of class and economics in seeking justice. I think Baldwin's critique is a simple one. People who are within positions of power and financial gain can take what they want with little to no consequences. Due to the story being set in the early 1970s, racism is in abundance and is shown in full display when Fonnie nearly gets killed by an officer, as the previous slide, for defending Tish when a young white man assaults her, while the previously mentioned officer was just across the street and only stepped in when a black man attacked a white man. This altercation represents the difference in power and financial status between people of lower income and those with finances and power, as within the time period of the setting of the book takes place, different cultures other than white had less opportunity and means to fight oppression. I really need to read a lot of the slides I make. I'm realizing that now during the presentation. The theme of powerlessness versus agency. The power of action can get a person through insurmountable odds, even when they are powerless, and is on full display throughout the entire book and its ending. The Italian woman sticking up for Tish and Fonnie when the officer attempts to arrest Fonnie, Pedrocito, and taking Tish to eat at the restaurant he works at while Fonnie is locked up, Sharon traveling to Puerto Rico to convince Miss Rogers to retract her testimony, which I believe this showcases powerlessness versus agency, as everybody's doing what they can within the circumstances that they're faced with. Pedrocito having to take care of Tish, while Fonnie is locked up. Sharon traveling to Puerto Rico to find a way to get Fonnie out of jail. And the Italian woman simply sticking up for Tish and Fonnie, a stranger, a friend, and a family member. Tish's strength and resilience as a pregnant woman. Tish throughout the book has gone through quite an emotional roller coaster, as she has to deal with Fonnie's unjust imprisonment while carrying his child. She tries to maintain working at her job, but it's quickly told by Joseph to stop, as that could harm her pregnancy. She refrains from pushing herself, as she knows her and Fonnie's unborn child is the only thing giving him hope, regardless of her own sadness over the situation. Foreshadowing and narrative tension. My favorite part of the book that displayed foreshadowing was after the moment Officer Bell licks his lips when walking away as the Italian woman berates him, which is a small physical thing you notice in the book, which isn't outwardly explained as, oh, this dude is really mad. It showcases a physical attribute that is foreshadowing in its own sense. But there's a much clearer instance of foreshadowing right here. After Officer Bell leaves, Fonnie and Tish head to a Spanish restaurant to eat, and Fonnie says, "They got us in a trick bag, baby. It's hard, but I just want for you to bear in mind they can make us lose each other by putting me in the shit." And this was on page 142. The way James Baldwin handles foreshadowing is when a climactic moment happens, he then continues to separate a story beat, and it comes back in a big and unforeseen way. Essentially, the climactic moment where Officer Bell gets to that confrontation with Tish and Fonnie. And like I mentioned, that thing of him licking his lips, like, oh, huh. And when they get to the restaurant, obviously we have Fonnie still worrying about that instance that Tish and him went through. So he's explaining to Tish, like, the stuff can happen. And this is a great foreshadowing moment, as stuff most definitely happens with Fonnie's imprisonment, because Officer Bell essentially, falsely imprisons him. The role of love in resisting oppression. I think James Baldwin wanted to tackle the subject in a way that conveys one message, and that is, regardless of the trials, family will always stick up for you. Examples: Tish when she defends Fonnie from Officer Bell, Tish visiting Fonnie in prison, Sharon trying to clear Fonnie's name, and Joseph and Pedrocito helping Tish while Fonnie is locked up. The point is, whether it is friends, family, or a significant other, there are people who will stand in the face of injustice for the ones they love. And I believe that is a reoccurring theme throughout the entire book. So, that's my presentation. And, yeah. Alright, let me end this.